Hey people, it's Nyan Stokey. Now this is another Black Holocaust video. This is using the New York Times as a source. This is Black Holocaust, what was his full name? Bruce Tucker. When a black man's heart was transplanted without consent. And I really want to challenge this, transplanted without consent. That's really soft language designed to, they stole it. They stole his heart, his organs right out of his body. The organ thieves, the shocking story of the first heart transplant in the segregated South. In May 1968, the family and friends of Bruce Tucker, a 54-year-old African-American factory worker, became worried after he failed to come home from work. When they finally got a cryptic phone call from a friend who had seen Tucker being rushed into an operating room at the Medical College of Virginia, they made their way to the hospital only to find out that he'd been taken there with head injury and since died. It was the funeral director, not hospital staff, who alerted Tucker's family the following day that his heart and kidneys were missing. Tucker's heart had been implanted in the chest of Joseph Klett, a retired 54-year-old white man and one of the first patients to receive a heart transplant in the United States. Virginia law required that at least 24 hours elapse between determination of death and declaring the body to be abandoned by family. But in Tucker's case, the surgeons needed to harvest the organs while they were maximally viable for transplantation and ignored this rule, instead evoking the novel concept of brain death. Of course, just like they say with black Americans feel less pain, therefore they don't need tranquilizers and pain medication, they created a new term to justify stealing their little organs out of their body. The hospital staff insisted they had done everything to locate Tucker's family to obtain consent, even speculated that no one was claiming him in order to evade the cost of his care. The future Virginia Governor L. Douglas Wilder, then a Richmond lawyer in private practice, represented the Tucker family in a case against the Medical College of Virginia that excludes African Americans from the jury and ended in victory for the hospital and the researchers involved in performing the transplant. In the hands of some writers, this would have become a powerful narrative, weaving one family's tragedy into a nuanced panorama of race, medical innovation, ethics, science, ambition, and the law. But Chip Jones, the organ thieves, which tells the story of what happened to Bruce Tucker, disappoints with its pedestrian language, telling omissions, and hagiographic portrayals of medical actors. Jones doesn't stop to interject at key moments in the narrative. Well, I think this has turned into a bit of a review on the book, but whatever, let's continue. To take one example, researchers rationalized their treatment of Tucker by thinking of him as a charity patient, the kind charged less for substandard care in rat-infested segregated wards in exchange for being conscripted into research. Such coercion is and was unethical and should not be treated as another story detail. Moreover, it should have been made abundantly clear that no amount of money could board an African American a bed in the standard ward. Medicare had enforced hospital segregation by the 1964 Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Hospital desegregation via the 1964 Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. But de facto segregation healthcare bias lingered even in the North. What happened to Tucker matters for reasons far beyond the appropriation of one man's organs. In the 19th century, black patients received care at medical schools, clinics, and hospitals by serving as teaching material and the appropriation of black tissues. Organs and bodies were commonplace. In Virginia, limbs were removed solely to train medical students in amputation technique. Bones in the Basement by Robert Blakely and Judith M. Harrington documents post-mortem racism, and Michael Sapple's A Traffic of Dead Bodies discusses the theft of African American cadavers to spare whites the indignities of serving as an anatomical training. And I don't even understand this. I mean, they keep talking about how blacks aren't human, blacks don't feel pain, and all these other things. So how do these contradictions happen? If blacks are so different from whites that they cannot, they don't feel pain, and all these other things, how can you understand the human body by understanding a black body? According to what you just said, there are two different ones and function in different ways. Of course, whatever. This extended to northern schools such as Harvard that contracted with southern institutions to buy black bodies. So keeping this in mind, institutions like Harvard bought black bodies. The author describes some of this key history of body appropriation but fails to engage with the ethics of these practices, explaining away the moral lapses of researchers as a result of systematic racism and professional ambitions. How is it explaining away? It is the truth. In the 1950s, for investigational purposes, researchers at the Medical College of Virginia deliberately inflicted third-degree burns on the skins of 100 patients a year at Dooley, a charity hospital for black children, and at St. Philip's, a sister hospital for black adults. Wow. They're you go in a hospital and they're deliberately making you sick and burning children. I didn't even know about this. Racism enabled the appropriation of black bodies, but there is a slew of complex ethical questions. This case also demands we ask, shouldn't a patient or his family be entitled to informed consent in which all implications related to surgery be shared, with black donors having borne the brunt of the risks and benefiting least from a new technology? And this is one of the things. I know someone who was asking me about going into hospital because he was sick, and I told him, hey man, I think you're absolutely right about being paranoid. There's more danger going in than there is staying out. And I maintain that opinion to this day. You're better off trying to fix yourself. Just, you got YouTube, people are building houses with it. Look up medicine on there. I still say it's safer for you than going to a doctor. Either they'll ignore you, or they'll do something to harm you, or misdiagnose you. It's not good for you, man. With black donors having borne the brunt of the risks and benefiting least from a new technology, do we need to bring the lessons of distributive justice to our thinking about transplantation? In apartheid South Africa, transplant mirrored Virginia's racial disparity, as white patients received organs from blacks, but blacks received none from whites. How did the policies of both nations drive this inequitable distribution? But the book fails to engage with such questions, and Jones avoids grappling with them by claiming there were no ethical strictures governing medical practice and research at the time. In the 1950s and 60s, he writes, doctors and academics' medical centers enjoyed so much prestige and authority, they often operated virtually unchecked from outside supervision. The notion of informed consent was non-existent. He is not the first writer to voice this fiction, sometimes deployed by apologists to normalize the abysmal treatment of African Americans. Far from being non-existent in the 1950s and 60s, the term informed consent, which describes obtaining consent that is predicated on conveying specific information about risks, benefits, known side effects, intention, design of, and alternatives to medical studies and procedures, first appeared in the 1957 landmark decision in Salgo versus Leland Stanford Jr. University Board of Trustees. However, as early as 1900, the Virginia native Walter Reed observed formal procedures for obtaining the informed consent of his yellow fever experimental subjects. In 1914, Schollendorf versus Society of New York Hospital used rights of self-determination to justify mandating consent from patients. A 1946 Atomic Energy Commission memo strictly mandated a higher degree of informed consent than even current American law requires. And that year, the Judicial Council of the American Medical Association also establishes widely disseminated standards for protection of human subjects, including voluntary consent of the subject, previous animal experimentation, and proper medical protection. Instead of engaging with questions of the transplantation ethics based on documented history, the author focuses on fictional accounts extensively invoking the fantastic Gothic writing of Edgar Allan Poe and African American myths about night doctors who steal bodies. How is it a myth? This whole article is about how he went into hospital for care and they stole his organs. God, just the gaslighting is out of this world. Unfortunately, he doesn't illuminate how the myth relates to the documented night body snatching from black cemeteries by doctors, an illusion which consigns warranted African American fears to the realm of horror stories and folklore. No, white folks make horror stories because it's a fiction for them. That's one of the reasons why black folks don't really like horror movies so much. There's enough scary things for them in the real world. This ahistoric approach is most dismaying, especially in light of telling errors that stud the narrative. The author writes, for example, about the infamous Tuskegee syphilis study that the United States Public Health Service recruited hundreds of African American men and gave them the painful, fatal disease. This claim is untrue. Although researchers have injected Americans with gonorrhea, syphilis, and other venereal diseases on at least 40 occasions since 1892, the study recruited 399 African American men who were already been diagnosed with syphilis and promised them with treatment. Wow! So you just said they've done this 40 times since 1892, but this one time that is infamous, no, they didn't do it. They wouldn't possibly be lying about it and claim they already had syphilis. I mean, the people who denied them treatment and kept the cure a secret couldn't have possibly infected them to start with. Oh, you're just making this stuff up. Just piss off. I can't deal with this. You see, I keep telling you don't trust these doctors. They're lying to you even now. Even a cursory look at the pertinent history, including some titles in this book's bibliography, would have prevented Jones from making this error. The Organ Thieves tells an important story passably well, but its evasions and occasional missteps hobble its power to illuminate. Well, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. I'm going to leave this article in the description. Please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.